Very good. I call to order the Lacey Equity Commission for March at 5:30 p.m. As far as the roll call is concerned, we have present in the room Commissioners Clay, Brown, Hart, Garza, and I'm Thelma Jackson. And online, we have Commissioners Headwood and Sauer. With that quorum announced, that take us to our land acknowledgement. Is there a reader for our land acknowledgement? Annie? Commissioner Clay.
We, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Squaxin Indian Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed and relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allow our nation, state, and city to develop as they are today. We recommend that the community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you, Annie. That takes us to our approval of agenda for this evening's meeting. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda, previous meeting minutes, and consent items.
A second.
Thank you. I was gonna call them separately, but it was all done in one motion. So we're done. And let the record show that our youth commissioner has joined us. Welcome. Public comment?
So Vice Chair, if I could, I believe we took a first and a second. Did we do a vote for the consent agenda items?
Probably not. I'm a little cold at this. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda, the previous meeting minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Close. Abstentions, none. Motion carries. Now to the public comments. We see we have no persons pre-registered to speak by way of Zoom. And we let the record show that we did receive 31 written comments. All of the same vein we've been getting in the past, so, you know, pardon me? Nonsense, 31 nonsensical comments as though it was generated by a bot. So we let the record show that those were received.
Can I, on that point, can I ask that the reader of the emails prioritize if there is something that looks like a real issue that the commission should look at? Like they put it at the
Are they
top.
fielding these or are they just sending it?
They look to be all the same, so.
I think what I heard Commissioner Clay was like, if something was identified as, you know, something that was pertinent business item to be able to highlight, you know, what pages they may be on. Right now, how the clerks approach it is they take it and they take it in the order in which they've received them. And so it's certainly something that we're taking a look at as a whole system of how can we maybe circumvent just any messages that aren't being sent, you know, by a person to the commission. So hopefully we'll have an update on that shortly.
Thanks.
Very good. Our inspirational item for the evening and reference Commissioner Clay.
Yes, today I bring you a little something from Deb Holland. She's a Laguna Puebla tribal member. She was a U.S. rep for New Mexico, and then to, the head of the Department of Interior in the last administration, and now she's running for New Mexico governor. She says, "Let me tell you about one of my favorite phrases, be fierce. Why do I love it? Because it perfectly describes my outlook on life. It means rolling up our sleeves to do the hard things and fight for what's right. But being fierce doesn't come easy. It's earned through perseverance. It's realized by facing challenges head on and helping each other overcome them. It doesn't matter what's standing in our way if we are standing together."
Very good. Thank you. Our business items before us this evening. The first one being the equity map review.
I'd be happy to show off the equity map here in just a second. Just want to see if there's any commissioners that may want to take on the inspirational item for next month, which would be April 28th.
Commissioner Garza, are you ready to inspire us?
I'm not a very inspirational person, but I'll figure something out, yeah.
Well, you're feeling in your heart. Yes, very good.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be able to show you all tonight our draft equity map. One thing I did want to comment about it is a draft. And so what we're hoping to get some feedback from you all tonight and maybe throughout the next week is just if you've noticed anything that maybe doesn't add up, or if any features aren't working, or if there's usability issues that you think could be improved, or if there's data issues or you have data questions. One of the things we'd heard, you know, when we were building this from the consultant was to think about it with a kind of perspective or story in mind and see if that held up or if it brought more questions to the forefront. And so we were hoping to get it out to you all and give you some time to take a look at it. We've been meeting internally as a group in the city. Myself, Veronica, we have representation from our Community and Economic Development Department with Hans Shepherd, and as well as our GIS, so our information technology systems, Gary Montgomery. We've been kind of the crew working with the consultants on setting up the equity map. And just over the last couple of weeks, we've expanded that horizon internally to bring in other group members for their review to get feedback from them on what their experience was like using the draft equity map. And we've gotten a lot of really great feedback. Some of that information has already gotten to the consultants and they've been able to update the map. But we're hoping to get some more information from you all and then expand that to a couple of other advisory board groups as well to get even more feedback so that we can make this the most useful tool moving forward. I know you all are very familiar since we've talked about these equity tools and equity maps in the past, but I do recognize that we have two newer council members or commissioners. And so just to give a really quick highlight, one of the things that the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Strategic Plan identifies is looking for equity tools and ways to make data-informed decisions moving forward. And so we've been investigating as a group here an equity map concept with the idea that we could show where there are areas of high equity comparative to areas where there is less equity in the community. And so the map I am going to show you is our first run through this concept. Earlier steps with the commission that we did was we took a look at what kind of indices that should be included. So what kind of data sets should we consider? We followed up on a couple of these with our, we followed up on all of them, I should say, with the consultants. They were able to identify a couple of data sets that helped fit some of the areas that we were looking for. However, they weren't able to get them all. And I'll use the one example that we heard was adult literacy rates. This group brought that up. We tried to find if there was a data set available that could be used, and unfortunately they couldn't find one. So you'll see under education, there are a couple of other data sets that were readily available, but you know, certainly something we'll continue to think about in the future if other data sets might come available. So I will share the screen here and show you what we have so far for our equity map. So just as a high level overview here, you can access this online. The idea would be that once this is finalized, is that it would be embedded into our city webpage. So people could search for equity or equity map on our homepage, and they'd be able to first go to a landing page. And on the landing page, we want to describe in more detail what the equity map is, why we have it, what we're using it for, and just doing a really quick review. I know I sent, as part of this packet tonight, the in-depth overview from the consultant. That's not to say all of that information would be on that landing page, but something short and digestible to get community members a little bit of information before they jump into what this looks like. Just to kind of orient, the group here to a couple of things that this has is, number one, it's got the map here, and you can see it's got a couple of things highlighted. So it moves with you. You can move the map, you can zoom into the map, you can do a lot of things. Right now, this black layer right here, this outline, that is the city limits for Lacey. And what you'd see in this blue marked area, that is the Lacey urban growth area. And there are a couple of areas where there's a little bit of additional block group data, and that's because block groups don't perfectly align with our city limits, and so there is a little bit of spillover into other types of block groups. You can see right now it has some coloring here, and this is our shades of our equity index. So areas that are in this really dark color, burnt brown, are areas where per the equity calculations, they have higher equity. So there's more equity amongst community members who live there. Areas that have lower equity are in this lighter shade, meaning that they're comparative to the rest of the county, and I should have said that at first. So this is a comparison not just of our community of Lacey, it's taking Lacey and comparing it to Thurston County as a whole. So you can see areas that have lower levels of equity based on this color right here. Question?
Looking at the big map now, before we get down into the others, as I was reviewing that, one of the things that would have helped me would have been some streets or something that would tell me where I was on that map. For instance, the two chocolate brown was in the lower left corner. I couldn't figure out what area of Lacey not with no streets or nothing. I couldn't tell.
Oh,
I
they're
couldn't,
there.
Yeah,
Just-
they need.
I couldn't follow it.
Highlighted.
I mean, for the whole map, but at least the main thoroughfares, Martin Way, College Way, I-5, something that,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One of the things that we're having, because we're showing the Lacey city limits and the urban growth area, one of the fears we have is too many lines showing up at this macro level. But I can see where you're saying like, hey, this is I-5.
this is
specific.
Carpenter, this is
Something.
Martin Way, this is
College.
Marvin Road.
Mhm.
Just something like that would
Help
help
locate you.
me know what,
Yeah.
make the colors relevant to me.
I do just want to highlight that you can zoom in and eventually you will see every single road.
Oh.
So you can see 18th, 19th, but you do need a
Quite a zoom.
you do need to zoom in to get there. So if you're looking, like, let's say we're looking for Martin Way and Carpenter, you do have to zoom in pretty close to see Martin Way, Carpenter, but you can zoom in as much as you want and you can also zoom out as much as you want too.
Okay.
But I
I
understand
guess
that
I wasn't
the-
zooming far enough.
and Chair Sauer, I see you've got a question.
Yeah, excuse me. So to go back to basic, if I'm missing something, I apologize. But what does that mean for equity index is very high versus low? What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Nope, great question, and we'll go into the nuances of everything that goes into determining those factors in just a second. But again, basically with the high being that there is greater equity, and with the low meaning that there is less equitable access to things,
So
so,
it's disparate.
yes, yep, great way to put it. So they may not have, for example, as many access to parks or to libraries or to other types of services. And so we'll go into those nuances here in just a second and show what goes into calculating each of the indicators.
Commissioner Hedwig, and so.
Commissioner Hegwood, I see you got your hand up too.
Yep. Two things. One, I'm wondering if we considered alternate text for this yet. That's just another accessibility technology piece that we can implement. Essentially, it means that like whenever somebody who's vision impaired hovers their mouse over a certain part, the coding would read out what their mouse is highlighting, and so they would be able to use this webpage still functionally without solely depending on the visual aspects of it. To that same point, I know that you and I have talked about the Civitas color scheme in the past.
Yeah, that's what
Um, I'm sorry?
Oh, I had that same question of, are these colors, you know, accessible to deuteranophobia, protonophobia, or trinophobia?
And that's
Yeah, exactly.
something that
And
has
yeah,
identified
sorry.
as something that we're looking into with the consultants.
Okay, yeah, and I would just, I mean, the Civitas color scheme exists, but there's other alternatives out there as well, to make this a bit more friendly for everyone. But that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we've been testing this for the last couple of weeks. And so we do have a list of things that we brought to the attention of making sure that we're taking a look into. Commissioner Hegwood, one of the things I did want to highlight is you can hover over certain block groups and get information on that. So I'm not sure if that completely answers what you're looking for. One of the things that we are limited to some degree in control is this is through a program called ArcGIS. And so there are
Mhm.
elements that, we can't change. It's dependent on the system, the program itself.
Yeah, this it would kind of function like what you're describing, but alternative text is kind of like if somebody used like a program that reads aloud on their browser and they went to our homepage and they hovered over the city of Lacey's photo for our logo, the alternative text for it would be activated, which would just say like it's the city of Lacey logo. It contains Mount Rainier and an image of a bird flying overhead, and there's water with greenery on either side, so that kind of thing. That it's not something that would pop up as something visual that we can see, but if they're using like a web reader, it would show or it would read to them what they're selecting.
We can certainly test that out. I do see that there is a read aloud function, and so I am very curious what would happen if we were to press that, but that's a great note here.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing. I'm not sure. I mean, there's, JS is specifically is like, kind of a function, and then there's different engines that run it. Some of them have it integrated, other ones, it might be a separate standalone feature, but that's definitely something I'd love to explore. I do see the accessibility option there as well, and that may be part of it, but it's just something I wanted to make sure that we were covering.
Yep, good points. All right, well, just to take a step back, these are really good points and really good questions and the exact type of feedback we're looking for, so I appreciate it. But maybe just to give a little bit more information on the map too itself. So what you can see, we talked about the map itself and how that can change. One thing I do want to highlight is you've got a toolbar over here on the left-hand side, and you can actually change your map options as well. So, one thing I heard was, hey, it'd be good to maybe get some things that I know a little bit more of where their locations are. We talked about zooming in, but you could also set it to satellite as well. So if you knew something you were looking for and you're like, oh, that's the building, you can turn on that feature as well as another way to kind of visually see where you're at and what you're looking at. I know that's really hard to see with some of the map options overlaid on it, but you can actually turn off all of the map options and see the entire city in much greater degree. So you can see right here, we're looking at the rack, and then you could turn on those features if you were really curious about the neighborhoods around the rack specifically. So a couple of features just to highlight, you've got your search and select. So you could, and let me just turn off the satellite here for just a second. Go back to the street and turn on the equity index. It does take some time. Well, it's in the beta. A lot of big data here. So you could, if you were looking for a very specific area, you could search by address. So we could type in 420 College Street, it would pull up that block group. You could go by zip code, or you could go by block group itself. So if you wanted to go by block group, it'll load all of the block groups up here, so then you can select the block group that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So if you were, only interested in this block group, for example, it highlights it, it's right over here. Or you can select multiple. It would pull you to that location and then it would update the data on the right-hand side to talk about the information specific to that block group only. You can pick multiple too, so if you wanted to select a couple, you could do that all at once. You can also select by drawing what you want to select. So for example, if I wanted to have a circle of, well, I want to know what's in the radius of the middle of Lake Loess habitat. It would pull that information and it would start calculating it, so you can see the information on the community members who live here, and it updates the data over on this side. You could also freeform it too, so you could draw it to a very specific shape if you were looking for some data for a specific area. It also, on the map options, it allows you to reset the map. This will take you back and get everything changed out of it. So anything you were looking at or saved, if you press this button, unfortunately, it will take you back to start zero. So just be mindful of that, and let's see if we can actually get it to do that. A couple of other features under the map options, which I showed you how to turn on the satellite. You can also turn it on to this gray, which is a little less detailed than the other map until you get up to it as well. But we'll keep it in the street view, and we've got our equity index down here. But we can turn off the equity index and we can turn on other indexes. So there are the accessibility index, the livability index, the education index, the economic index, and the environmental index. So if somebody only wanted to take a look at things related to accessibility, you can turn and toggle that on. And then it will give you an updated map, and it's talking about areas that are, you know, very accessible versus areas that have a much lower accessibility. So you can do that for any number of the different types of indices that we have. You also can download the data. So if you have information that you're, hey, this is gonna help me write a grant, or I'm thinking about a new program, you can download that data so you have it and you don't have to worry about your map being reset at any point in time. You've got that available for you. You can also share your map. So if Vice Chair Jackson has a really good map and really wants to show me something, she could send me a link and I could see everything that Vice Chair Jackson was looking at as part of the equity map. And you can also print it down here. This is where you can find out more information. So that packet of information I sent you can all be accessed there. And then if there's bugs and feedback that we need to know about, there's going to be an area and space there for community members to communicate that to us.
You have the accessibility index up, but on the right-hand side, you don't have the, oh, then you have to push that one. Okay.
Yep.
Both of them.
And so, yeah, so that's a good segue. Thank you, Commissioner, for going over to the other side and what that shows. So we'll keep the accessibility index on here for right now. But what you see is you have these 6 categories where you can toggle through very specific information. And so one thing, just to go back to the demographics, so it's showing you the demographics of the entire city right now. And we could change that by changing what we're looking at or by selecting an area specifically on the map. But if you wanted to look at just the urban growth area, you could take a look at the data in the urban growth area. If you wanted to take a look at the areas combined, you could take a look at both the city and the urban growth area. If we wanted to only take a look at this area over here, which is a combination of both of them, we could do that and it would update the data to show us specifically for that section of both the city and the urban growth area.
That's crazy.
I will say it's not a perfect system, right? But it's giving you a general idea of, you know, the community members who are living in both the city and the urban growth area based on the various data sets of information. You could also then go through all of your features, so your accessibility feature, your livability, your education, economy, and environment. And we'll take a little bit of time looking at both of those, but I'm just going to reset the map here starting from scratch. So every single one of the indices was categorized into one of these. With demographics, like I said, it's population. It shows you information on individuals with disabilities, race and ethnicity, people who were born outside of the United States, people who have limited English, people from other countries, age and sex, et cetera. So you get a good understanding of just the broad community. These demographic data sets were not used in the indices to calculate any of the indices. They only use the information under their indices. So when we're looking at accessibility, for example, what's going into this calculation is everything that's listed under accessibility, not any of the demographic information. The demographic information is there for awareness only and for people finding information on what kind of the community is. So one of the things, we're looking for as we're going through this draft is, places where information maybe doesn't appear to make sense or seems a lot higher than what we anticipated. And I'll use the example here of transit accessibility. We've had some questions about the transit accessibility score. And so we have,
Pretty high.
it is, right? 350%. So we have reached out to the consultants on, is this data set right? Because, based on our understanding of this, it doesn't seem to make sense that we would have an area of the city or the whole city as a whole that has 350% access to
We don't need cars
transit.
anymore.
But again,
3 buses.
But again, it is comparative data, so we'll get down to that, but there's things like that we really wanna know. Did you see? And we're like, whoa, we need to have a conversation, because this isn't adding up. Because ultimately, this is just a draft, and once we update all these data sets, we make sure that they're correct. This could look very different from what's being presented here today. So you can see in accessibility, all of the things that we're taking into account: internet access, access to vehicles, road quality, retail job service, 4-year average voter participation, library access, food access, pedestrian and bike trails, and park access. Under livability, we have median home value, cost burden households, rated health on insurance rate, fatal or serious injury and crashes, percent low life expectancy, and walkability. And then some additional information on just some crime in the area. With education, we have educational attainment. Again, this is one of those number ones that we've asked for just a little bit more information on, how that's calculated. But every single one of these, you can get more information and where the data set is from by collecting the information icon. So you can see where they have this weighted index of educational attainment, and there's certain numbers, 1, 2, 3, that are associated with your different attainment of education, where the data source is, and then if you wanted to go access the original data source, you could go straight to that and take a look at the full data set. It also has, again, comparisons to the city or the selected area versus Thurston County as a whole. So each one of those has those information, so you can get a little bit more on what's going on. And
I had that issue earlier too. You had to scroll all the way back up.
you do, yep. You can see it's got 4-year high school graduation rate, average student test rate, and average student mobility rate, and then kindergarten readiness. Again, unfortunately, we weren't able to find any adult literacy rates for it to be able to use in this section. For economy, we have quality job index, unemployment rate, median household income, home ownership rates, non-auto commuters, and poverty rate. And then finally, under environment, we have heavy traffic roadways. This is also one of the data sets that we asked a question about because we were curious on how this was calculated. So more to come on that one.
Population.
Urban tree canopy, non-diesel emissions, and then some additional toxic ozone concentration related data sets. One of the things we flagged was for example, the urban tree canopy and people, being curious of where that information and data is coming from. The other data set that I just showed you was coming from the census. And so that's a pretty clear cut data set. So just to show you one that's not census related, it actually gives you the source, so and then the link to the source, so you could directly open that link and see the entire data set and get some more information on how that was calculated. All right, so gotta scroll back up.
Yeah,
We
that was a
learned.
functionality thing I didn't really enjoy.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to note, so, perfect. One of the things I did want to show too, under map options, and I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but now that you've got a good sense for all of the different types of features over here, under map options, you can turn on any of those indices like we talked about. You can also turn on additional map layers. So these weren't necessarily, some of them are demographic based, so they're not taken into account in indices. Some of them are the map layers from some of the indices if you wanted to get a specific look at those map layers. So as an example, you can turn on a map layer which shows people of color. Think a little bit, but it'll update the map to show that data set. You could also select, let's say you are very curious about library access. Let's turn on library access specifically, and so you could turn that field on and it would update it, and so it's now showing folks within a certain area of a library. You know, our library team here might be like, hey, that doesn't make sense, actually, we need to take a look at this, like how are some of these places indicated as high versus low? So we certainly want to go through all of those data sets and, you know, get a little bit more information on it. And then just one more example. So we've got library access, we've got accessibility. We want to go into home ownership rates because I know that's come up previously before. So we could turn on home ownership rates and we could see areas where there is a really high degree of home ownership rates comparative to areas where there are much lower degrees of home ownership. So I'll take a breath here and just open it up to you all. I got some ideas here already written down, which are fantastic ones, but were there other things that you all saw or that you're curious about with the equity map, the draft that we have?
Could you go back to the very first one, the browns, the tans? Just for curiosity for me, the chocolate down there at the tip of that, where is that? What community is that?
Sure. So this is Horizon Point.
Horizon Point,
Uh-huh.
out there by the train station?
Yep, so the train station would just be down here.
Okay. So it's the most equitable community.
In the draft,
In the
again,
draft,
as we
yeah.
finalize some of the data sets, this is subject to change, but that's what it's presenting as of right now.
So based off this data set, I mean, there's a lot of room for improvement. Given the very low kind of sprinkled throughout the center and low pretty much everywhere. Am I understanding that right?
I think, you know, what you're seeing again, and again,
It is,
draft
yeah.
data, so all of this will be updated, and so I would say, I would caution making any sort of finalized decisions with what we're showing right now, because we are updating it to make sure it's accurate and correct.
And is this gonna be yearly updated?
This would be updated every 2 years.
Sure.
That is the idea. But yes, if you were reading it right now, that would be, hey, like there are multiple areas where maybe we need to take a look at different programs or projects. And this isn't just for the city to use, this is for the community
Oh,
to
yeah, I
use.
was already thinking of using it, doing an assignment on it.
Yeah, you know, and I think, you know, if say you're a nonprofit looking to start a new program, maybe this helps you kind of think about other areas or where you may want to locate some of that programming.
When human services are deciding where they want to distribute funds, that can help them as they are looking at proposals.
Mhm.
Which ones of these are addressing needs in these particular, yeah.
Yep, and so the Human Services Commission will be the next group that will be reviewing this as well next
Okay.
week, so, yep, absolutely.
Remind me where you find what goes into the equity index, the criteria.
Sure, I think that's a great question. So if you go to the About, perfect segue, you can go and download the complete user map. So if you wanted to see everything all at once, right, you could go through and toggle through the layers on the map. This is also still a draft, so it will be updated once it's finalized. But if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, it'll tell you the data dictionary, and if it's neutral, it's not being used in any of the calculations. So we got our demographics, so like I said, none of that is taken into account in any of the indices. And then when you get to economy, which is one of the indices, it starts telling you again that this was taken into account into the calculations and what you want to see to show more equity. So you can see here in this example, the quality of jobs index, you want that to be higher, whereas the unemployment rate, you want that to be lower. And so it's showing you each of the data sets that's used to help determine the calculations. And I do want to highlight up on the first page, if you don't mind me all jumping around here, just for a little bit, on the first actual page. It does talk about how this method was came to be, and it talks about the Kirwan Institute of Race and Social Justice. And so one thing we do want to add here is just a link to that so that folks could go in and read more information on how that group built these indices. So
Built that in.
Under the economy, are they looking, do they take into consideration self-employment?
yep, yeah, so this would be based off of your census information. So you can fill out on the census, you know, you're employed even if you're self-employed.
Okay, yeah, cause I see the unemployment and then I see retail jobs, but where would somebody who was an entrepreneur or fall in to that category? Like, are there other categories within that economy portion of it?
So on the economy portion, so there's a couple of things, and again, it kind of goes back to the data set and how people are self-identifying as part of the data set.
Mhm.
So you have things like the unemployment rate, which again is gonna be based off of census information, so what you fill out in your census.
Mm.
So, you know, if you're a small business owner or contractor, you're still likely going to put that you were employed.
Mm.
I have questions regarding the veracity of the data because it's subject to self-reporting that you just said. So is that a true depiction of the actual? I mean, and I did email you about it originally, the median household income, because, you know, that seems higher than, and maybe I just hang out with people who are less fortunate.
Well, and I think, yeah, that's a good question.
So I guess my question is kind of two-pronged. How is the city / community, how are we collectively going to engage the public to engage in this and get accurate data? Kind of holistically, not just to the economy aspect of it.
I think it's, again, we're trying to use data sets that are comparable across larger areas than just the city. So because this is taking you into a comparison of Thurston County, you could also set it to be a comparison of Washington State. You could have set it as a comparison to the entire United States. We need to find data sets that are the same across communities. And that's why the census is oftentimes the best data set that is available, because everybody takes the census.
But not the most accurate.
You're absolutely correct. It may not be the most accurate for a variety of reasons. You know,
Yeah.
number one, people, you know, self-identify. Two, you've got a lot of statisticians who are doing a lot of, you know, work in the background to make assumptions based on who is actually, you know,
Yeah,
filling out
that's-
the census.
That's my concern, because it just, and not to say that it skews the entirety of the index or any of it, but, you know, it's presents weird to me, because if I'm going to, for example, go and write a paper on the median household income, and then I go and survey, you know, someone in the top end of the spectrum, the bottom, the, you know, north, south, east, west of each of Lacey, for example, and I get 100 people and I get nowhere's near that point, then it you know, you get what I mean? It's a fundamental flaw in the accuracy of the data and what we're presenting to the public. Kind of the hill I'm kind of stuck on.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think again, you know, this is the best available data that we have, and there is no other substitute for this information, because even if the city were to try to go out and find this information, number one, it would be so localized, and two, we would not have the response rate that something like the
That's the other
census
concern
has.
is you had to incentivize the other one a while back, didn't you?
I mean, there was a really, really big push with the 2020 census, you know, for folks to get out and make sure that they were filling out the census, and those types of resources, you know, don't exist at the city. And so we're trying to take, you know, which, yes, I think it's good to ask questions, but it's the best available information that we have, and I think, you know, other folks across the country have as well.
No, it's just not possible to be very accurate,
Yeah.
even when you're talking race and ethnicity.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, you know,
self-reporting.
like I saw
Now,
the,
if you have a household that's mixed, a blended family, how do you report? If the mom is filling out the census documents, what does she put? The father's filling it out, what does he put? He just don't know, and then two, a lot of the younger generation, they've never declared race. They don't know what to put in there, you know? So, they could be mixed, two multi-racial. Which one do they choose? So you can't get it 100% accurate. The census is the way of reporting, and that's, it's hard to get any
it's the
more
best,
accurate.
best available tool, I get
Best
that.
available.
What's the cost? I remember you mentioning for this whole equity index?
Sure. Before I go to that, I think, one of the things that the user guide describes, kind of the question that we were just talking about, is that this is intended to be one tool of many that can be used to inform decision-making, strategic invention, calls to action, and partner engagement to promote greater equity and access. So I think just keeping that in mind of this isn't the only thing, but I think, going back to your comment or question of, well, maybe if you've identified some things in this map, you want to go and do some additional outreach and engagement in areas to make sure that you're meeting whatever the intent of your program or policy is. So it's not the only mechanism. To answer your second question, so I think, we're still finalizing some of the elements, but it's likely to cost around $40,000. And we can get you the full number once we complete the project.
Yeah, I only ask because I'm going into a policy, budgeting and finance class.
Nope, happy to provide that information once it's finalized.
And then the census doesn't track LGBTQ community. I didn't look on the whole big list, but I imagine it's not on there to get any information.
We can certainly confirm
From
that.
where you get the information, but
This looks like, an excellent tool
oh, it is, yeah,
based upon a lot of things we currently have in place.
yeah.
I worry about 4 or 5 years from now, with helter-skelter happening at every level of government right now. We might not even be taking census
Data.
in years to come. We might, all of this energy going into perfecting a tool that can really help a lot of people. Just to have it blown out of the water with the participation of departments and databases and, but I know we can't worry about that, but we just dealing with what's here now, but
Yeah.
all that just moves around in my head all the time, like, oh Lord, what next? Every day is another headache to add to it. But let me just talk about this. This looks like an excellent piece of work that's going to serve a lot of uses for a lot of people. And as it gets further perfected, it's really kind of mind-boggling to just sit there with that mouse and, boop, all that instant information that's there at the fingertips. I can imagine the staff's pretty excited about the potential use of it.
Yeah, I think this has been a really good project, and I think we've had, as staff, I can say, just meeting with them last week, there were a lot of great questions. Some of them, very similar to some of the ones that you all said, and so I think there is going to be a lot of good uses, and we want to make sure we can get it as close to good, but knowing it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
For education, does it also go into like technical school or vocational? I remember seeing like if you've got a bachelor's, master's, those, but does it break it down like that as well?
That's a great question, and I think it does not, unfortunately. It looks like it talks about an associate's or above that.
Yeah.
So I think it is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Of how could you get more information? And maybe that's where your
Maybe
economy
with public
section
servers.
and
Yeah.
jobs is kind of a proxy to that, because it doesn't answer your question exactly.
So the census probably doesn't ask that, you think, as well? Cause I know looking forward, from this point forward, a lot more people are may not be going that direction, and they may go technical vocational education or straight into the workforce. So that might be something to consider. And then I see Kim has a question.
Yeah, so this is a great tool. I wonder how you plan to inform the community so that they get to use this tool. Because I mean, we hear about it because we're here, but how are we gonna let folks know that
I
they?
mean, develop a
this is-
feedback loop for the community to funnel their criticisms.
Yeah, or questions,
Or
or
questions.
maybe they're really excited about it because it's a really great tool. So I think it's a really good question. So I think two things. So we want to go through this process of engaging some advisory boards, getting some feedback. We're also going to engage some other stakeholders in the community just to get another kind of broad perspective. And then based on all of that, kind of try to finalize some of the elements. And once we get to a place where we feel like it's ready for prime time, we will be doing a big push on, our Lacey Life, our Lacey Weekly, social media, our website, to try to get that information out. But one of the best things that can get information out is actually word of mouth. And so we appreciate you all talking about it and, making sure that community members that you deal with on a daily basis know that this is up there. To get on the feedback loop, we do have a help and feedback. And so that's something that we're contemplating of, how does this work? So right now, it's just built and set up for us to provide feedback. But the idea will be like, once this is ready to go, it would say like, hey, if there's an issue, who to contact. And, we'll want it to go to the city first because engaging our contractors is something we need to be under contract for. So you've got an opportunity for a contact information and more help. You've also got in the user guide that identified spaces for that information as well.
Not like Wikipedia.
So
Go and make your changes.
Just change it on the cuff.
do we know who else have this? Other cities like Olympia, Tumwater. I know Tacoma, seeing this at Tacoma some time ago, but anybody else that we are aware of?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, when we were doing the research and data on this, we did look, across the United States as well as in Washington. In Washington, I can speak to a couple of examples, then I'll give a few across the United States. So you all have mentioned, the city of Tacoma already. The city of Lakewood also has a map. The Port of Seattle has one as well. And so you can get those links in your staff report, so you can open those up. When we first started looking at this, we highlighted a couple, one was in Portland, one was in Raleigh, North Carolina, just to give a couple of examples off the top of my head of places elsewhere that had these types of maps.
So what's the next stage of this process?
Next stage, so we are again working out some of the bugs. So if you see anything over the next 2 weeks, please let us know. If you have any additional questions, please just send me an email and we'll make sure that we're working with our contractor on updating it. We're gonna be going to the Human Services Commission. I think we're also gonna try to get the Lacey Youth Council as well to do a review of it, so we can get a younger perspective. And then hopefully finalize some of that information and then get it out to the community, hopefully sometime in Q3.
Hopefully when?
Sometime in Q3. Great.
I have a question. How private is that? Can I send that link to fellow cohort students and
I would-
professors and?
I would say right now, just because the data is not
Yeah.
perfect.
Well, I can
Yeah.
explain that to them as well. We're all
Yeah.
scholars.
I mean, the information is
But
available
to
there,
get
but
feedback and.
we're holding off on broader feedback right now. We want to start first with this group and then ask some key stakeholders for additional feedback. Yep. Well, great.
Great.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate the feedback. And again, if you think of anything over the next couple of weeks, please let me know.
We've been talking about this for a long time. This is really exciting.
The next item then is the DEIB Summit update. Veronica?
Yes, it's just a quick update. We have decided that it's gonna be free of charge. So we're thinking of having around 100, 150 people. We're gonna invite around 200 so that we have 100 100, 125, 150. Yeah, no cost. We're still gonna look for some sponsors, but we have the City of Olympia contributing with $2,000, and then the Y, $2,000, the League of Women's Voters, I think 1,000, but that's specifically for speakers or facilitators. We prepared a budget to provide like a snacks, coffee break, and the meal for lunch. If it's 100 people, it's gonna be like $4,000 approximately, 3,500 per thousand. If it's 200 people, it's like $7,000, so it's considerably more. We're thinking, so this quote is based on some other organizations that have organized events and have hired Ramirez, the Mexican restaurant. We're thinking about also having a food truck outside the Bulogi. In case the people who are attending don't like the Mexican food, they can have another option. The only speaker that we have confirmed so far is Erin, I forgot her last. Yeah, Erin Jones. And she's gonna lead a youth workshop. The rest we don't have yet. No, it's not a workshop, it's a youth what? It was a
Well, she's
youth,
gonna open up the summit and have a youth presentation
Yeah.
in the morning. We're inviting each of the youth councils. So Lacey has a youth council, Olympia has something similar, Tumwater, the APAC. They have a youth council, so all of them are gonna be invited in. And what we're looking at is they would have a representative who would present on behalf of their council, and they can have other supporting members there. And we're gonna spend, it's a 45-minute session to give each of them an opportunity to present. And we'll provide some subject matter for them to address, some key areas. And we'll do that portion. And then, in the afternoon, we'll have, breakout sessions that are set for 90 minutes, I believe.
yes.
I push for more time because oftentimes, 45 minutes, you rush in, you go through, you don't really get to the crux of, the information and really have a good exchange and good results. So we're looking at having those in the afternoon. And, one of the sessions is gonna be with the municipalities. And I'll facilitate that breakout. And I'll be looking for support. We talked about who we're gonna invite to this summit. So I'll just talk about, municipalities. We're looking at inviting, city councils. And so if one or two members can come and attend either the morning session or be available in the afternoon to take part in the breakout session we'll be having. So they can share and listen and get a feel for what's going on. They can talk about what we've done here in Lacey. And we'll have, the mayor of Tumwater has already been invited. And she's excited about it. So of course, we'll invite Olympia. And we're also looking at staff members, people who are actually doing the work, running the departments, who have an interest in sharing and learning about, inclusion, equity. So we're gonna invite all of those people to be a part of that session.
And the schedule is gonna be from 9 AM until 3 PM
Yes.
till May 10th.
Mhm.
And SBSCC Lacey.
And there'll be other smaller breakout sessions in the morning. But we're looking at 4 or 5 different subjects. And we'll have facilitators for each one, and the attendees can pick the one they want to attend to learn and share, yeah.
That's where we're at.
So this is by invitation only.
Well, we haven't really discussed that. We wanted to be inclusive and allow everybody to participate, but they are very focused on having only Thurston County institutions attending, or, so nobody from other municipalities or counties or cities.
Sure.
Right, yeah, I pushed for it to be Thurston County, not,
Oh, yeah, I'm
They were
not,
talking-
yeah, when
but
you
what
said
we-
100 to 150 people.
right,
Yeah.
we're
That's my
starting
question
in,
about by invitation only versus an open community registration kind of thing where non-municipality kind of folk could come.
well, they
So-
can, so here's what we do, we're starting inside and working our way out. So we have a number of organizations that are part of this, like the Y and the APEC and the, you know, city council, the, cities and other organizations. So they're gonna look, first of all, who in their organization they're gonna invite to register. And then it'll filter out to some others. But we did not support the entire community, just open
course,
invitation.
yeah, that-
So, right.
Unmanageable.
Well, that was, at one point, we were talking about that, and I had
Well,
to
that's
pull them
a-
back and say,
That's a
no.
summit, that's a
Right, let's make it,
convention.
right, so we are able to focus it. Now, we're getting better, boy. It's been a lot of discussion, but we're narrowing it down to the focus is pretty much there now. But it's taken a lot to get us to focus in on doing a summit where it can be reflective of the work that we've done and we can control and get good outcomes versus having a free for all with 300 people.
Hey, Cliff, did you say Apex?
APIC,
APIC.
Oh, okay, okay.
Lynn Crowley.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Sorry, I thought you said Apex, and if Apex will get involved, then I'll be interested from DES to get involved. But I know APIC is different than Apex.
I don't know, APIC, APAC, I don't know the difference, but yeah, Lynn, with Lynn's organization.
And thank you for the information you sent. You want to talk about that?
One thing about this, I got Orca Books to come. They want to come at the lunch hour and then at the 3 o'clock. And they'd like to have I'm gonna pick up a sign that'll go on a table in the morning saying, Orca Books will be available at lunch. So they're very excited about pulling out some books for this thing.
And it'll be at South Puget Sound Community College, Lacey campus.
And then I read that Evergreen is having an equity symposium, April 16th and 17th, with a speaker, a poet, on the night of the 17th. And I plan to go, might as well get I'm retired, might as well get as much information about it, so if anyone wants to go with, or I'll just let you know what kind of information what kind of structure and information was there.
Yeah, so the 16th is supposed to be a plenary. I just pulled it up, and the keynote speaker is gonna be on the 17th, and it's gonna be in the evening for the keynote speaker. They didn't list the times for the 16th, but it's gonna be more of an opening plenary session, and then the keynote speaker is gonna be at 6:30 PM.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be in class, so I won't be.
Is there a statement of expected outcomes? So for the planning group, by the end of the day, what's the hoped for accomplishment?
So what we have discussed, go ahead.
Well, there is a written statement
Mhm.
that we have. I don't have it right here with us now, but
I
there
can-
is a full paragraph on what it's gonna involve and what the outcomes, because with this stuff, we're capturing what's happening in these, and we're gonna have a report out at the end. So there'll be an overall report, and there's a focus on what we want to accomplish. I don't have that statement.
We'll present it in the next.
Okay. Because I'm wondering and I'm curious about what happens after that, so it's not a one-off, you know?
No, actually, we actually want to do it every year.
To
There's also
build
gonna be a
one to
specific,
the next.
there's also a specific call to action as well. Vice Chair
Yeah.
Jackson, for that as well.
Yeah, and the agenda, the last part of the agenda for the day is a call of action.
Yes.
Is this one still gonna be like, trying to do more than one this year quarterly, just to?
That changed. Thank you
changed.
for the reminder. Yeah, they went back to the original
Let's do it.
idea of having just one a year.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. We can go then to the community events and celebrations overview and back to Shannon again.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm gonna share the screen with the presentation and we'll jump right into this one. I know some of this is going to be review from last week, but I did want to just go over some of the things we talked about and then dive a little bit deeper into, if the city is to move forward with creating a program or policy, what should be some elements that we consider. And so I've taken a look at the city of Ben's and I provided that information for you all, but we'll go over each of those elements and get some feedback with the intent that we come back and take a look at a draft at the next meeting for discussion. So just as a quick overview, we talked about how this is something that was identified for us to take a look at as part of our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategic plan. I'll highlight that under city services, it says provide services that are responsive, transparent, accountable, equitable, and welcoming, and an emphasis on providing a safe, trusted environment for underserved community members. We also found in acknowledgements and events under program service, policies and services, it talks about recognizing and supporting diversity and inclusiveness through acknowledgement statements, public art events, programs, and the use of city platform to amplify community voices. And one of the things it talks about is the number and support for events and programming that highlights cultural diversity increases. We can also see a very similar element here in the community access and engagement under relationships. This is also something that the council, as part of the joint meeting with the Commission on Equity, said, hey, we really want you to spend some time looking at this year, and really making a recommendation on ways that we could move forward with other types of cultural events and celebrations here in the city. We talked about all of the great events that our Parks Department puts on, including our Lacey Cultural Celebration, which I know you all are well aware of because we have had a booth there for the last 4 years at this point. We talked about different types of grant programs that exist in the city. I've highlighted 3 of them here. So our lodging tax grant program, our HOA neighborhood grant program. And I do just want to highlight that as of 2 years ago, you don't just need to be an HOA. You can also have an informal neighborhood in order to access some of these dollars as well. And then our human services grant, which you all were very involved in setting up the human services work group and then the commission and have talked about this grant program. So we talked last time too about how the city just has limited resource capacities and this includes fiscal, so just dollars, but it also includes human capital as well. We don't have a lot of staff here and the likelihood of increasing staff at the city here, just given budget constraints and fiscal realities is, it's not likely going to happen anytime soon, especially when we're talking about programming. We also want to create something that's sustainable, that has community support. So it takes a lot of resources for the city to put on a program. It still takes resources for the city to support a program, and it still takes city resources to support grants as well. So I did want to highlight that, even if you were to create a grant program, it's still some resource intensive, but not as resource intensive as us planning a big event like the cultural celebration, or even something like music in the park or play in the park. And then the other thing we talked about was just creating something that was transparent, so all community members have the ability to access information on it, that there was a fair and equitable process so that anybody who may be interested in, future grant programs all know when to expect there to be an application cycle, what they're going to be reviewing for, who's going to be the decision maker, what's in the contracts, what kind of reporting is required, how are reimbursements received. All of that is open and transparent in the decision making. Like I mentioned, we took a look just briefly, very high level, at Bend, Oregon, as well as a couple of other cities, some in the United States and one in New Zealand at our last meeting. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into what Bend, Oregon does and take a look at their policies. So Bend, Oregon has a community sponsorship and grant program. You can go on their website, which is provided in the staff report, and you can go through and learn about their principles, their eligibility criteria, their deadlines, how to request to be sponsored, their post-event reporting, and who is their awardees. They have all of their policies listed on there as well. I included 2 of them in your packet. The first one being the council policy on discretionary funding and sponsorship of community programs, services, and events. And the second one being the award and use of city funds for community partnership, sponsorship grant policy. And then the final attachment that I had on there also is their request form. So how you would actually submit for dollars for this program. So you can take a look at it. So in their program, they have a lot of things that they consider, and I want to go kind of slide by slide with you all and get some feedback on this to move forward. So they talk about setting up a purpose. What is the purpose of this grant program and these dollars? And so what they have suggested are to advance council adopted goals, citywide policies, and city strategic planning, to promote the city, to support nonprofit organizations, to support new events, and to benefit communities and highlight cultural events, and to create a welcoming environment free of discrimination is the purpose behind these dollars. And so from your all's perspective, are there other things that should be considered or maybe not considered in the purpose of a program like this?
Can't think of anything.
A lot of those encompass a lot of other things, so, you know, the list could be endless, but it would fit somewhere. Kind of see, gotta think it through, yeah.
Pretty comprehensive.
Okay, well, we'll start with this and we'll come back and we'll circle back to the group and we can have more discussion. So if you're like thinking in another week, oh, I got something to add to that list, we'll be back next month, so. The next thing is the process, and so their process looks a little bit different, but you know, reviewing it, some thoughts that occurred to me is, again, wanting to make sure that it's fair, it's equitable, and it's transparent. And so, you know, the first thing that ultimately needs to happen, as you all know, is we would take this to council and council would adopt the policy and provide funding for it. So that would be step number 1. If that step doesn't happen, then well, it was a great process. It was good working with you all on this. But that has to happen. So eventually that is, you know, where we want to get to is making a recommendation. And then council providing the funding. So very much like the advisory board stipend program, every budget, the council now provides funding for that program. And the council could elect in future years to not provide funding for that program. The next thing would be to do is to establish a application guideline window. So, you know, I'll use LTAC as an example. So our lodging tax that I was just talking about, our window for that application opens every July and it's open through the month of August. And then we do our review in September. The group makes the recommendations to council in November as part of the budget, and then it gets approved. So having something consistent where people know you can apply for the grant, you know, let's say it's February. You know, applying for a grant probably in the summer doesn't make the most sense for a grant that would likely have a lot of programming in the summer. So, you know, if it's something early in the year, like January, it's open through February, and then the funding continues. Having the first review be by city staff. And one of the reasons we'd want to do a review by city staff is just to make sure that they meet some of the eligibility criteria and that they would meet any kind of permitting requirements that are necessary. And I'll use the example of if you shut down a road, you have to go through a permit to make sure that you can legally shut down the road. Our police department knows about it. All of our essential service providers know that that roadway is not something that you can just drive through. So we want to be able to do a first review just to make sure that they're meeting codes and criteria. And then the second thing for review would be what we're recommending is to bring it to this group to do a review and to make recommendations. And those recommendations would go to the city council. And then the city council would approve. Maybe they would take the recommendations wholesale and say, these are great. Maybe they would make some additions of their own. And then after the approval process, the group would receive the money, would get the opportunity to host their events. And then they would have some sort of reporting mechanism on how those dollars were used and, who attended their events. And maybe a report out to a group like this, like the Commission on Equity, on how the event went. So that was our kind of draft thoughts on a process. Any thoughts or additions that you all would like to contemplate?
I'm thinking about the work that we did on the event sponsoring policy. And that some of those issues around values, matching city values, that would be some in the criteria that the city staff would initially look at, similar to the event program policy that we worked on.
We could definitely take a look at that too as a, part of a future question and putting that in the purpose, again, that is matching city values. So we can take a look at that in more detail in the future.
And it certainly would be something we would look at when it comes to this commission for review, as we're recommending as it goes through the rest of the cycle, inclusivity and values and those kinds of things. If it's missed by the city, we'll take a swipe at it when it comes our way for those kinds of things, won't we, Ann?
Right, well, we'll move on to the next one, and again, we'll come back to this. So the next one is eligibility, and I took some of the things that Bend had in their policy, and then I also added a few more things for consideration. So not eligible for funding would be anything that is promotion of religious purposes, promotion of political organizations and individual campaigns, organizations that discriminate any protected class. And I think, again, we could pull from some of the language we used previously, for-profit organizations. And then the two addition added here would be outside of the city or Lacey UGA, wanting these events to be here in the city or the city urban growth area. And then events that charge fees for participation. So both of these are, I think, especially number 6, the latter one, we wanted to get some feedback from you on if you think that is something that we should consider. But again, we want feedback on all items too.
Fees on participating as far as the community or the vendors that want to be a part of the event?
That is a great question. The way I contemplated this was fees on participation, not fees on vendors. So charging somebody to come into an event.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if it's obviously it'd be a nonprofit if they have, a donation booth, that was one thing, but no, not
Not
not admission charge,
How do you discern whether the person, like, because you don't want like, okay, yeah, I can consider myself an event planner and plan something, like how do you vet the individual?
Yeah, and I think that's where, having it, maybe the eligibility requirement be a nonprofit. It does limit, I think, a lot of folks from potentially participating, but it does guarantee that there are other mechanisms to do, kind of a who is the organization and what is their intent, what is their purpose?
Correct, yeah, so then maybe you should have like some type of a 501c3 or some type of business licensing type of thing so that we can vet them that way. And not just, I mean, as a person that does events all the time, there are scammers out there that will charge or will say that they're doing something and hosting an event and then find out down the road, the vendors find out down the road that that's not a legitimate person. So that would be my only concern as far as the individual that's putting in the application. How do you vet them?
An official 501c3 nonprofit.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this-
Generally,
They'll have a board.
yeah, you'll have that, you'll have your UBI number through your state and, you know, those things, you show those documents, W-9s, all of that stuff. Generally, it's a packet that as a nonprofit you present whenever you're gonna do something or to
Yeah.
funders or to whomever.
And then some referrals too. I would consider, most of the time as a vendor, I filled out applications and they wanna know where else have I gone and vended. I think that would also be a good thing to have as well on the application.
We just need to be careful along those lines because we talk about new events and new organizations. So some may be an upstart or may be relatively new. This may be their first time. They may not have references. Or it may just be, second time.
Previous, yeah.
Right, so we don't want to, that's the inclusion piece. We don't want to preclude people because they don't have a long line of references.
And Karen, I see your hand is up down there.
Could you give an example of promotion of religious purposes and an example for political organization, like what that would mean? Like, are they talking about like campaigning?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So if I, as Shannon Kelly Fong was running for, what should I run for?
Mayor.
Okay, I'm not gonna go there. If I was running,
Like a state legislature.
if I was running for governor,
Okay.
thank you, there we go. I couldn't apply for an event for, Shannon running for governor. This is my event that I want to get dollars from specifically. If I had a nonprofit though, let's say I had a nonprofit that helped animals that had 3 legs, as an example, but I'm also running for governor, you could still host something as with your nonprofit hat on, as a kind of event to, get folks to adopt 3-legged animals. Whereas I couldn't do it though if I wanted it for my campaign. I couldn't get these types of dollars.
And for the religious purposes?
Yeah, very similar. It's for the promotion of religious purposes. So I think that's just a distinction to make clear. So that doesn't mean that, religious nonprofit groups couldn't host events, but it would be for, and this is again, the wording from the city of Bend, it would be for the promotion of a religion.
And there's a difference, a distinction between nonprofits and those organizations with a 501c3. Am I hearing you say that they need to have a 501c3? Because you can be a nonprofit in the state of Washington without being a 501c3. So just so that distinction is clarified and made clear, and a lot of nonprofits become ineligible for some grants unless they attach themselves to a fiscal agent because they don't have their own 501c3. So,
You have nonprofits that may have a 501c7.
no.
And so they can't, there's certain rules that
Mhm.
the contributions or support of that is not tax deductible. Whereas a C3, it is tax deductible.
But a lot of nonprofits don't have 501c3s.
Right.
So-
And they're doing some great work
Mhm.
in the community. But they do have to show that they're affiliated with a fiscal agent that does.
Yep.
So just so we're clear on that and not exclude someone, because that's an arduous process to get a 501c3.
Mhm.
So what I think I'm, maybe with all the going around the table, maybe to start thinking about just starting the program off with nonprofit, not necessarily that they need to be a 501c3, but they would still have to provide support of like a board of their mission, their purpose, and their nonprofit status from the Secretary of State. But they may not be to that level because they may be
Federal
a new
501c3
starting.
designation.
Is that,
Yeah, it's very clear when you get a C3 or C7 or whatever, what you can and cannot do. It's very clear, so those organizations would know
Mhm.
very specifically what they can and can't do. And if they violate it, they risk losing that status.
Yes.
So they're pretty good at that.
So are we saying some type of designation, not just limiting it to a C3? And a C7, just some type of designation saying that there
It says
are.
on here that, oh, sorry. It just says on here that, we can't have for-profit organizations, not that they necessarily have to be a qualifying nonprofit.
Registered
that?
with the Secretary of State.
What did you say?
So I think, Commissioner Hegwood, if you want to say that one more time.
I said, for what I say on here for the considerations for organizations that aren't eligible, it just specifically states for-profit organizations, not necessarily organizations that are nonprofits. So anything outside of the realm of for-profit organizations would still categorically be eligible. Does that make sense?
Not really.
Okay, well, it doesn't say
But it
anything
says
about
not
organizations having to meet a threshold as a nonprofit status. It just says that they can't be for-profit. So anything outside of that would technically still qualify. So I think with this language, we're still doing just fine on what we're discussing here.
It says not eligible, it says for-profit organizations on it.
And I think if I
Correct.
could,
So
Go ahead.
he's saying, because it says for-profit, that for-profit are not eligible, so anything that's not
Other than-
for-profit would be eligible.
I would just think it would need to be clearly spelled out in whatever eligibility criteria that's listed.
well, we could take a deeper dive into, I think that's
Yeah.
a really good point, and we can circle back to, again, like, to what degree, but for right now, we'll try to keep it broad, and then we can see if we need to refine it in the future. Sound good? Great. Acceptable purposes, and again, I'm taking the language from Ben and I modified it a little bit. So they have event and program coordination, which would be, but not limited to, reasonable expenses for staff time, advertising, venue costs, food costs, permitting fees, purchase of prizes or giveaways. And I think we answered this question earlier. If we want to say no fees for admission, then we wouldn't necessarily need to have this last bullet point, which would be for subsidizing participation fees or creating a scholarship opportunity to increase accessibility.
Yeah, we wouldn't need that if it's free. Right?
Like,
Oh, okay.
like.
Don't have to give a scholarship to cover it. It's free.
It's free.
Anything else on what should be considered acceptable uses for right now, and knowing that we'll come back and think about this some more?
The reasonable expenses for staff time. The state has a standard. So I guess the city would need to look at, are they gonna adopt the same standard as the state? Because they look at,
What's
$30.
reasonable?
well, it's $30 an hour for volunteer.
How about like equipment? They would need some, I'm not sure, like, something like a laptop or some equipment they could probably use, and then infrastructure. Would they
Rental of
need
speakers.
facility? A lot of, yeah,
Yeah, equipment, technology, maybe
Yes.
we'll put it under there.
yeah.
I think, just to circle back to your comment, Commissioner Brown, one of the things with staff time too, if it's a nonprofit with staff, we could ask, for them to provide, kind of an itemized staff like, resources that go into it, even if it's like down to kind of like an hourly projection. And some of our other grantees do that. So we have some grants for some nonprofits, and they do provide us all of the hours and the hourly wages to determine. what the
Yes,
costs are.
yes, and with, my nonprofit, we get grants and stuff, and we work with the state commerce. And they, very clear, volunteer hours at $30 an hour. That's the standard for the state for volunteer hours. But it comes to the city may not be held to $30 an hour. It may be something else that you would refund or allow the grant to be spent at that level for staff.
Mhm. And I think that is
volunteers.
a distinction of, it would only be for staff, so folks who are actually employed rather than volunteers as currently written. We do have a program, again, the HOA grant program, where you do have an option to volunteer to meet your matching grant, but I think with this program, that's not something we're recommending or suggesting. It would have to be actual staff time.
Small nonprofits, oftentimes 100% volunteer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to do this and
What kind of figure are we thinking? Are two questions, or is it like, okay, if you apply for this, you get a $5,000 hit, you can use whatever you want for this? Or we're creating a budget and proposing that, you know, this event, we would like $10,000 for this event? Which one is?
So we'll get to a slide that talks about maybe some considerations for piloting this program.
Mm.
And like what we, would maybe wanna bring back to the council for consideration. And I think sometimes going small to get big could be helpful. But I think with the idea with this, maybe to answer the second part of the question, is that the funding would come from the city for the groups to plan and host their events. The city wouldn't necessarily be involved in the day-to-day planning of those
Right.
events.
No. right.
Okay.
Okay.
And so it's the next slide, but this one was just some of the unacceptable uses that was pulled from Ben. So it talks about use of and purchase of alcohol, promotion of religious purposes, promotion of political activity, and purchase of products, services from known entities that discriminate by any protected class. And so we can take a look at these items as well. Some considerations on transparency and reporting. So we have in here just as some ideas for consideration. It being a reimbursement-based program where you can only receive funding after services are performed. So that way the city knows that they have actually been performed. That there would be a contract that would be in place. We try to make this a simple contract, knowing that some of these events would likely be pretty small. And that just like Bend, we would kind of take the idea of publishing all of the fundees, just like we do with our lodging tax, and making that readily available for the community to see it, what the amount was and what it is, the event that it was used for specifically. And then like we talked about earlier, potentially having some sort of reporting mechanism where they have to come back and talk about the event to this group to hear a little bit more about what happened.
speaking for the little guy. Those
I think that, oh, sorry.
yeah, the reimbursement-based programs and grants can be very hard on the small nonprofit that don't have a lot of money.
That's what I was gonna just say, because I think it's good to have this, but there should be some sort of an exception so that you be able to pay for them to have certain things in advance.
My suggestion was going to be something similar, but
Yeah.
I would suggest perhaps maybe like a 50% upfront, maybe, and then the other 50% is a reimbursement or something to that effect, so it's less of a barrier for organizations that may need this money to make these events happen. Nothing's free, of course. That may seem like a reasonable compromise. I'm not sure what everybody else's feelings are on it, but that's just a suggestion for me.
Yeah, right. Like, for example, if you have to buy the refreshment, you will have to pay out of your pocket and then get reimbursed. That can be a barrier for small folks. So have some ability where you can get prior and submit the, I mean, as long as it fits the original scope of work, I think it should be okay to approve that.
Yeah, having to buy insurance policies, it's a lot of stuff you have to purchase or pay for upfront, and signing contracts, and, they say, oh, then you have to make a deposit. That could be, stressful on a small nonprofit. So I think, if they're approved, I think the city should then have a meeting to talk about, let them tell you what they would need and support up front, and then go through. So if you're confident that their budget is tight and they've shown that I need to buy insurance policy, I need to sign this contract and make a deposit, I need to do these things, and it makes sense, then maybe the city pays them up front. But knowing that if you cancel your event, it don't happen, that, you owe us money back.
It'd be my approach to work on trust and good intentions and to go. I'm sorry, but that's what I feel, that the process of approval will tell us a lot. And then I think upfront.
I mean, you can put in the application, right? Like, am I gonna need, I may need assistance prior to, you know, the event, and you can delineate those two into two different batches, right?
And the-
I think in theory you can. I think number one, what we'll need to do some more diligence on is the city's ability to provide upfront funding to organizations. You know,
Cause I'm the same, I approach it with trepidation, cause giving away money just sounds too good to be true.
right, and I think, you know, I think you've all highlighted, and I appreciate your optimism, Commissioner Clay. But, you know, if an event doesn't happen and you've already provided the dollars, you know, it's really difficult of a process, could be a difficult process. And so that's something we'll do some more diligence on in the next.
And the
couple of
other
weeks.
thing is, after the event, so if my nonprofit has spent $5,000 and then we provide an after-action report to you, is it 30 days, 6 weeks
Oh, a timeline?
before I get my check?
Reimbursed.
So I could be struggling while I'm waiting on that reimbursement. Cause generally it's, 30 days after you submit your report, or 2 weeks, but you have to wait on that. So I'm just speaking from a small nonprofit, the struggles you go through. But if you're a nonprofit that got, money,
You don't
you're
have that
okay.
problem, yeah.
But those, I've been on large nonprofits and they have large contracts, but it's reimbursable and they have to outlay a lot. They have to pay staff and all of this stuff. And then they submit their report, 4 to 6 weeks later, they get their money back. I mean, that is tough. So the lag time, once it's over, you submit your report, say within 72 hours, we'll reimburse you within 2 weeks or something. If that's clear, then they can plan.
And now you get
That's
the thought, when I go back to when you were saying if it's a new person, they may not know all of that stuff right at the application process. And then, let's say they're going for a $15,000 or $20,000 grant for putting on this show, and then at the very end, after they've already said, okay, this is what my proposed budget is gonna be, it ends up costing them a lot more. So, yeah. That's another thing.
Well, I think that particular item, does need a little more investigation. We don't want to put the city in jeopardy, but at the same time, we don't want to exclude people with a good service or a good program, but don't have the affordability up front. And there are a lot of people, that don't have that upfront. And I don't know what the happy medium is, but I think you hear the concerns. Yeah.
I said, I live this life every day in working with a lot of nonprofits. And some of them don't have much ability to do this, whereas others do. And I see the frustrations that they go through and the concern when they have to put money up front and they may not have it. So they end up doing real small things, but they'd love to do something bigger, but they don't have the monies to invest up front and then wait on reimbursement. So we have to look at, including, not excluding people because of that financial strain that they're in.
I would love to do a nonprofit fair. Every nonprofit in town, come out and, meet everybody. Maybe I'll apply for that.
Well, one thing, kind of on the note of, nonprofits who are doing this the first time, nonprofit fairs, which I think that's not a bad idea. What we did with our lodging tax is we have a meeting before the application window opens to talk about what's required, what are the steps, what you'll need, and what's in the contracts. And so that could be something we look into to try to make sure that people are as informed before they apply, so that when they do receive dollars, they have a little bit of kind of what what's on the other side.
Mhm.
Right, and
Yeah.
you know, the deliverables, that's the lesson that nonprofits learn. You can apply and say you're gonna do all these things and you get the monies, but you gotta look at that contract. It says, oh, now you have to do these things. And they have to have the ability to do that. So having a pre-meeting to make it clear to them
Yeah.
that this is what you have to do. If you ask for this money, you have to
Yep.
deliver this
Do you,
product.
do you happen to see how Bend and other, not that you talk to Bend, Oregon often, but have you reached out to them to discern how they mitigate that issue?
No, I think it's a good question, and that's certainly something we
I don't know if
can
that-
reach out to Ben, but I think.
That's in the.
I think since we've been
Yeah.
doing the workshops, and yes, yeah, absolutely, we love to learn from our other jurisdictions, and again, that's why we're starting with this as a, just, hey, here's what they have. Like, here's some thoughts and considerations, like, we obviously need to go through the process and make sure that whatever policy we draft meets all of our city requirements, our state requirements, our federal requirements, so we'll get into much more detail, but this is kind of a springboard, so we're not recreating the wheel as
Yeah.
a starting point. So it is good to call up and say, hey, like, what's been your pressure points? Are you seeing a lot of like nonprofits that, you know, can't apply because of this? So that's certainly some follow-up we can do. Last thing, and I think we have a long way to go before we need to, you know, make any decisions on this. But again, you know, knowing that at some point we'll have to go through a council recommendation, not only with policy, but for some funding and, you know, thinking about starting small in the first year, just knowing some of our, you know, fiscal limitations. So what I have here is just an example of, you know, maybe we start at, you know, $15,000 with the idea that you could have a maximum and minimum funding level, with a minimum being about $1,000 and a maximum being around $3,000, because that would ensure that we'd get somewhere between 5 to potentially 15 events, depending on the number of applicants.
Yeah, just as long as the red tape is not too much. Because, I mean, you put in, if it takes you 5 or 6 man hours to get $1,000, you're losing money. So long as, if it's, the application process is, you know, fairly simple and easy.
One other question about money, you know, say we put 15,000 in the pool and only 10 was used the first year. Could we roll that 5 over to the next year? I don't know about how the budget works for.
Then I'll apply for it and take the rest.
We can always make the recommendation that those dollars get rolled over. Yeah, so like maybe the next year it goes to $20,000 that's available.
Yeah.
Call me, my foundation will apply for that money.
Well, again, I appreciate the feedback on this first kind of, hey, we're taking a deeper dive into, you know, what another jurisdiction does, what could be some thoughts and considerations. So we'll take the information that you all provided tonight, we'll do a little bit more diligence on it, and we'll come back to this group for further discussion. So thank you.
That takes us to our commissioner reports. Any commissioners with anything to report for this meeting? Annie?
Things. We previously talked about, permission to use the City of Lacey banner, in the Olympia Pride Parade this coming June. Wonder if we need to make any kind of formal ask, or if the equity manager is a person to ask, or my vision is that anybody from Lacey, including staff, would be, you know, would be great to have a banner walking down the street with community. So, but it takes permission.
Yeah, and I apologize, Commissioner, because I know you did ask about this last meeting and I have not followed up on that, so I will absolutely follow up on that.
Okay. Another thing I would ask is Olympia's Social Justice and Equity Commission had a a survey, community survey, and they came out with some, having read in the paper, with some kind of disturbing and results, and informative results. And so I wonder if we could get the copy of their report for that.
And I think this group received that previously, but I'm happy
Did
to
we?
send it out once more. This was the report on racism, is that, yeah, but I'm happy to send you out the link
Yeah.
again to this group.
I don't remember getting it, so maybe
Yep.
send it out. And then I was here at the councilman meeting last week when they did the proclamation for the Trans Visibility Day, which that was really powerful. Again, it was the second year that we've done that, so that's really important to this commission too.
Any other commissioners with anything to report or ask about? I would just report that I participated in the protest rally today down on the waterfront, Percival Landing, speaking out against the cuts happening on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Well turned out group of people. The rain stopped just in time, didn't need umbrellas, the sun never broke through. But an awful lot of people with just the signs alone were fascinating to stand around and read. Good turnout, good support, cross-section of this community. And one of the announcements is about the really big rally that's coming up on April 5th. It's happening nationwide. And it's spearheaded by Indivisible, the organization Indivisible. So Olympia Indivisible, I forget who's the other major sponsor for it, but at the state capitol, that will actually be a march. Today's was just from the senior center across the street and to the covered area there on the water. So it's wheelchairs and walkers and all of that could participate and assess it. But the one on the 5th will be a march along the streets down to the Capitol. And it'll be happening all over the country, all 50 states, especially all 50 capitals and individual cities as well. So you'll be seeing a lot more information about that. It's on a Saturday in the afternoon. And so just a lot of activation of people who were saying today they've never protested or participated in anything like this. But they're excited to be out there with other like-thinking folk. So the whole issue of equity, you know, when we're talking about healthcare and a lot of fascinating data presented about just how many thousands of people right here in Thurston County, Social Security is their only income. Medicare is their only health care, you know, and on and on and on. So it's broken down into much smaller, more understandable understanding of the impact of these things that are happening at the federal level, that no one escapes the sting. And if not us now, just wait, next week is coming kind of thing, you know. So I just share that with this commission to be heads up about the individual constituent groups that we interact with to help mobilize people and get them out. They can start making their signs, whatever is their issue. You know, Department of Education has been disbanded. Food banks and the flow of food to feed people. It's just a heartless, lack of compassion process going on now, that no one's immune from the impact in one way or another. And if not us directly, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, children, doesn't matter. So let's just pay attention to what's going on and distill it down to what does that mean for our community. Because when we look at all these demographics and poverty and food deserts and this kind of thing, it's gonna get so much worse. So much worse. So I think it behooves us as Equity Commission people to be paying particular attention to how these things play out in our community, to help inform us about our task and the work ahead of us as we advise the city on policies and processes and procedures, because we've never seen anything like this before. There's no precedent for it. So it's a new day.
Yeah, thank you.
Somebody else.
So that's all I have for my report, and hearing no other commission. Oh, I'm sorry, I should look over my shoulder. John?
No problem, Vice Chair. Yeah, I actually wanted to share also that I attended the Veterans Rally at the Capitol the Friday before last. And similarly, we had a great turnout, people coming out for veterans' rights and their pension benefits and their healthcare rights. And it was lovely to be surrounded in a sea, like you said, as well, of like-minded individuals, but also a sea of like-minded veterans, and specifically overwhelming majority of minority veterans out there showing up for their people. I also ran into the former mayor and a few other local stakeholders. That was great to have those conversations. I also pleaded with, or I guess went directly to a city council meeting, as Shannon is aware, to ask the city council to consider making the city of Lacey a trans sanctuary city as well as an immigration sanctuary city. And then I also wanted to follow up. I know that we're working on this grant funding proposal, which would be great for a lot of events going forward, especially for smaller events. But as it happens currently with what's happening here in Thurston County for Thurston County Pride, I know there was still the other piece that we had discussed at our last meeting about kind of like a stopgap on how we could be involved in that. And I haven't heard any conversation around that so far. So I just wanted to ask that question to see where we might be at on that front, and or if we have anything in the works, or what our thoughts are on that, or anything else on that subject.
Yeah, Commissioner, I can address the latter question. I think, from our perspective, we would like to create that equitable, transparent way for folks in the community to apply at the same time for, funding for future projects. And so I know, obviously, this is something, the council wanted us to look at through the duration of this year, and that's why we're, trying to get a start on it right now. But coming back with them with some way for it to be open for the entire community to go through in a fair process is, our recommendation.
Yeah, no, and I totally support that. With that in mind, though, I mean, we are at the end of March and June is fast approaching. And so I'm wondering if there would be any ability for this, like this event, for example, for Thurston County Pride for the city of Lacey to get onto it, or if it's necessary for us to perhaps have a maybe a less fiscal impact on the Pride, but still nonetheless, coming with a recommendation to bring to the council on other ways that we can be involved with the Pride event that's happening this year, just to make sure that we're not missing out. Assuming that process probably won't be rolled out in time for it to have any effect on the dates that are already set for the Thurston County Pride, if that makes sense.
I know, Commissioner, one of the things you brought up was maybe having some sort of like volunteer or booth presence at this event. And that's, I think, certainly something when we're talking about, not having a budget for an event or a process, that we could take a look into being some sort of potential participant. Maybe not a fiscal sponsor, but,
Sure.
what could be some representation that we could provide at those events.
Yeah, I think you and I had spoken when we spoke with LaDonna last. There was already mentioned that there was no cost for governmental organizations and nonprofits. So there's no cost to the budget there, aside from whatever resources we have to pull from the city to make it happen. Obviously Shannon doesn't work for free, but the rest of us volunteers could show up and maybe perhaps man the booth, and same as like at our culture celebration. Talk to the people that we're representing and hear what the issues are and let them know what we're out here doing. to ensure that, you know, we're representing them effectively. In addition to that, we also discussed perhaps advertising for the event, you know, pushing it out in the newsletter or even potentially like the banner over College Street and some other um, ways of that to help publish the event out to the general public, because I mean I didn't even know about it happening last year, and I'm fairly in tune with local happenings, especially when it comes to Pride, and I completely missed it until after the fact. Um, and Shannon, I believe you didn't know about it at all, so and it that just because I mean right now I believe it's just a Facebook event, and while there is, I saw that they have like Pizza Clutch and GSA that have signed up because they discovered the event on Facebook. They obviously could have a much broader reach here within Thurston County. And then, of course, there's definitely a crossover opportunity with Capital City Pride that we could help facilitate. And that also, again, doesn't cost us anything to do, just to connect those two together into other community resources that we have contacts with as well, to let them know that it's happening, and if they have any interest in joining in that event, help make it bigger and better. I'm going to bring in more people.
Thanks, John. But that does it for the commissioner reports, then that takes us to our director report.
So I have 3 reports, but the first report's actually not my report, so I'm gonna hand it over to Veronica to provide an update on the employee survey.
Oh, okay.
So we launched our first employee engagement survey last Monday. Rick announced it the previous Thursday during the employee recognition event. And the first day, actually, we had a very good response. We had 69 people filled it out. As of today, we have 149 out of 330, so we're at a 45%, which is pretty good. They told me that we wouldn't, other state agencies, that it would be like almost impossible to get to 70%, but we might. I'm feeling positive. We're sending another reminder tomorrow. We printed posters and put them in different locations throughout City Hall, Police Department, and even Animal Services shop as well. We sent an email with a link. We have also the link in the intranet. Rick filmed a video, and if you can see it under the city manager's office. Because the police, I conducted one, well, and Rick helped me with a shop too. Listening sessions, but the police department, they couldn't attend any listening sessions, so that's why he recorded the video. So we hope we close next Monday, the 31st at 70%. So we'll give you another update. Thanks.
Love to see the questions.
Oh, sure, I can send them to you.
What kind of set, if that, I
Mhm.
mean, it's,
I have them in
Yeah,
an Excel
plan that-
spreadsheet. I can send them to
that
you.
the workforce, you know, becomes more and more happy with their work and where they are. So I think it'd be interesting to see what the survey
The
is.
listening
before we-
sessions actually went very, very well. There were some teams that the managers were like, I cannot believe my team was so engaged. And they were asking questions and they were like talking to you. I've never seen them do that. I was sure they were not gonna ask anything or engage or anything, so it went very well. They were very responsive.
Good communication.
Some were asking about bullying, I received a couple of emails very concerned about confidentiality, so they wanted to really say what they feel, but they wanted to make sure that we're not gonna use their comments, for example, as and as an exam, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were assuring them that, yeah, we're gonna respect the anonymity as much as we can. And we're working with a consultant, they just signed the contract and we signed the contract as well today, so we're gonna start working with a consultant tomorrow. And they're gonna help us create a dashboard so we can start analyzing the responses. And we have a commitment that we're gonna report to all the staff the results.
Good.
So we'll make sure that the questions get out to all of you. So Veronica, if you want to send it,
Yeah, I will
send it
send it
out.
tomorrow morning.
Just, if you just want to send it and I'll make sure it gets out in our follow-up email, we can put it all in
So
one
do I
place.
send them to you?
Yes,
Okay.
and that way we can have everything in one area so that everybody can access
Oh.
all of the things we're talking about.
Great.
The next item on my report is the Community Forum on Active Duty Veterans and Families update. So we do have our first planning meeting this Thursday for the Community Forum with Commissioner Garza, Commissioner Hart, and Commissioner Hegwood. We were thinking about having this in April, on April 29th, and we had lined up a couple of partners to be able to do this. However, it seems like the date is not gonna work. So we were hoping to do this likely May 27th. So if you just put a placeholder on your calendars, although the date may be subject to change. But right now, we have gotten commitments from, number one, that we can host it at the Lacey Veteran Services Hub, so it'll be held over there. We'll work with the service providers to get the information out. We're gonna be working with South Sound Military Communities Partnership. They're gonna be bringing their program coordinator, who is full of resources and helps with things like their human services working group amongst other working groups, so they're gonna be able to provide a lot of resources. And we've also reached out to AUSA to see if we could get some additional resources through them, but we'll be looking for other groups to maybe join us. The idea would be that we would actually host this jointly with the Thurston County Veterans Fund Advisory Board. So that way they can hear what's needed in the community as well from their perspective. So hoping to get more details dialed in, but it won't be April. It will likely be sometime at the end of May, just given some of the other events that we have coming up in May with the summit, for an example.
What about the military spouses club?
I think that's a great idea, and I'm glad you're on the planning committee, and we'll
Yeah.
talk to you on Thursday.
I'll see if I can find out who that is. I used to have a connection. I used to be a part of it, but see if I can help figure out who that is.
Yep. And so we'll go over kind of the details and who we might want to reach out to, and, if not having, them be part of it, at least who we can send information through to try to get as many folks there to hear their perspectives.
Have you ever heard of Fufore?
Food for all.
Fufore? Lacey Rotary used to sponsor that every year when I was a Rotarian, and I haven't been for a while. But it was a time of year that this community recognized the military.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is.
Fufore is
Food for
what they
all.
call it.
It's the chamber that goes on through the chamber, because they do that on some island or something like,
I
yeah.
don't know, but I just knew it used to be a project of the Lacey Rotary when I was a Rotarian. But it honored and recognized the military leadership and activities in the community for the families, the children of military families. I haven't heard of it lately, but it used to be a big thing, Fufore, Foo, I forget how you spell it, but it's kind of something dash, but it was Lacey Rotary. The main Lacey Rotary, and I know there's more than one Rotary now, but that was at the time the only Rotary in town. And they did that every year and honored the military community. So I don't know how that might link up in any kind of way. Maybe Markia can track that down, but that just flashed in my head.
Yeah.
Fufore.
Great, we'll look into that some more and see if there's any other connections there, but I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday and for our meeting to start planning this. The last thing I had on my list was a retreat discussion, and I think I got some really good feedback on what you all were looking for as a retreat, and so I was hoping we could start thinking about dates. So looking sometime for a half day, maybe Saturday retreat.
This is Thurston County.
Fufore.
That was not how I spelled
Thurston
it.
County. Right.
All right, I got it now. So looking maybe sometime in the June timeframe for a retreat, maybe early June. So if you all wanna just take a look at your schedules, and I'll send out an email on this, but maybe having it Saturday, June 7th or June 21st, sometime in that.
What is this one?
21st.
Juneteenth, we'll take that one out.
So 7 June, but what is it for? For the
So-
retreat?
Yep, one of the things that we were looking to do is hold like a half-day retreat, so I'll send out some dates on a doodle poll and we can all figure it out and hopefully just finalize what those dates are and we'll plan to do, 4 to 6 hours so of retreat activities.
Good,
And that is the end of my report.
great.
Do you know what time this Thursday on the 27th for the active duty veteran and families update first meeting?
It's at 4 PM and it's virtual.
Okay.
Good. Well, had a full productive meeting this evening, so if I see or hear nothing else coming before the commission, we stand adjourned at 7:30.
There's still some daylight out there.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Feel better, Kim?
Thank you.